Welcome to Close Listening. I'm Zach Morgenstern, joined as always by silent co-host Ludwig von B. And one of my big projects this year was listening to all the Beatles' original albums for the first time and posting reaction videos to them. And obviously, the Beatles all had solo careers after their times in the band. And while I'm not going to systematically go through all those records, I did think it would be fun to sort of follow up my Beatles series with an ambitious video where I try and talk about the first solo records of John, Paul, and George. And of course, Ringo made solo records as well. I wasn't able to get my hands on a physical copy of Ringo's first record, and even if I did, I figured this video is going to be a long one, and on top of that, the Ringo first record, Sentimental Journey, it's all cover songs, so I figured it wasn't as important a record to analyze. So the records in question: John Lennon, Plastic Ono Band, which is released December 11th, 1970. McCartney, by Paul McCartney, released April 17th, 1970, which is actually before the final Beatles album, Let It Be, is released. And All Things Must Pass, November 27th, 1970. So all of these records within the same year, but all with a bit of a different flavor to them. And let's start out with John. So this record is called John Lennon / Plastic Ono Band, and that's because there was also a Yoko album with the same cover art released called Yoko Ono Plastic Ono Band. I should mention it's a bit ambiguous that this counts as John Lennon's solo debut, as he and Yoko had previously collaborated on two versions, Life with Lions and the Wedding album. I haven't listened to these. I assume the reason they don't count is A, the Beatles still existed while they were made, and B, they're probably too experimental or too rough draft-ish, unfinished songs to count as real John Lennon solo work, but I won't assume too much. And the Plastic Ono Band itself, I feel like it's more of a conceptual thing than an actual backing band for John. Perhaps not unlike Wings was for Paul, but the band, meaningfully for the purpose of this record, was John, Ringo, and Klaus Voormann, who was the bassist. And you get appearances on organ from Billy Preston on one track and Phil Spector on piano from one track. But largely this just feels like John's DIY record. It starts with a track called Mother, which starts with really nice, beautiful pianos, and you hear John doing some really beautiful falsetto. It can be really beautiful to listen to, but it certainly feels like more of a rant than a song. Track number 2 is called Hold On. It's a bit more melodic with vaguer lyrics. It has a bit of a jazz pop feel to it. Track number 3 is called I Found Out. It's a screamy one, reminiscent of a mixture of Come Together from the Beatles and Cold Turkey, a later solo song by John. It has one line that was really memorable: "They didn't want me, so they made me a star," because it feels like this whole record, starting with Mother, is dealing with John Lennon's abandonment issues with his parents, his father never really being around, and his mother sending him to live with his aunt when she remarried. And track number 4 is one of the famous ones. It's called Working Class Hero. It's basically John Lennon doing Bob Dylan, which is funny because he says towards the end of the record, "I don't believe in Zimmerman," by which he means Bob Dylan. So it's basically an explanation of Marxist values in folk terms, talking about alienation, distraction by the culture, how you don't really get to enjoy your job, and how he looks to the working class as a source of salvation. Track number 5 is called Isolation. This might actually be the strongest song on the record. My problem with a lot of these songs is I feel like, despite the Plastic Ono Band, Lennon is going out of his way to make this his solo record, and that makes clear some of his musical limits. So he's playing a lot of piano, which sometimes sounds beautiful, but it's harder to play with real simplicity on piano than it is on guitar. Like, I think our ears are at least culturally trained to think guitar sounds good when it's just playing a few chords. But on lots of these songs, you can tell all John is doing is plunking chords on the piano. And whereas, if he had his fellow Beatles with him, or if he let the studio band do more, you might hear, a slightly more complex piano part. Isolation is a simple song, but the simplicity just goes very well with John Lennon's vocal delivery. And even though John Lennon, with his solo career, feels like he's message first, music second, which is why Working Class Hero and God may be the most famous tracks from this one, I think Isolation, specifically with its opening line, may actually be the strongest track on this record. Now, I really liked Isolation, did not like track 6, Remember, which sort of has a similar sound to Isolation, except there's this really frustrating, overly simple, energetic beat throughout. It's just sort of like they're running a metronome, even though of course they have Ringo, a real drummer there. And I don't know, there's some creativity with this song. It ends with a weird Guy Fawkes reference, but I found that oversimplistic rhythm really difficult to listen to. Track number 7 is a bit prettier. It's called Love, and it's some simple piano with John singing to the ideal of love. Track number 8 is called Well, Well, Well. It is a kind of similar song to the Beatles song, I Want You, She So Have You. I want you so bad. That one, but it's more searingly electric. Track number 9 is called Look at Me. This is another one that I describe as fairly beautiful, and it's John just asking the very basic questions. Who am I? And this is foreshadowing, the big piece of this album, track 10, which is God. So if you know of this song, I mean, John makes the most of his simple sound. It's very beautiful, very ethereal to listen to, but it doesn't quite work as a song because it's more of a list. So John states his theological view. He doesn't think God exists. God is a concept for talking about our pain. And then he talks about all the religious and political and cultural things he does not believe in before saying what he believes in is Yoko and him. And then there's a bit of song at the end where he says, I once was the walrus, but now I'm John. So it's with this record, he's almost rejecting a lot of what worked for him and the Beatles and saying, that was never really John. What you're about to hear now, this guy with these issues with his mother, this guy who is interested in Marxism, this is the real John Lennon. And then it closes with a mini concluding track to, I guess, echo Mother, called My Mummy's Dead, and it's just a lo-fi, and it runs for less than a minute. So now, on to Paul. This record is called McCartney, and unlike the Plastic Ono Band, there's no pretense of there being a band here. The only other credited person on this album is Linda McCartney doing the occasional backup vocal. It's really Paul doing all the guitar, drums, keyboards, different kinds of keyboards then, like Mellotrons. Track number 1 is called Lovely Linda. I really liked the way it sounded. Like, it was really folky and homespun, but it was sweet and catchy, and Paul's voice sounded nice on it, but he really only has the one line to sing, la 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 lovely Linda with the flowers in her hair, and then it ends. Now, track number 2 is called That Would Be Something. This one lasts for the length of a normal song, but just like the Lovely Linda, Paul doesn't really have anything beyond one line to sing with it, so he just manages to stretch that one line, and because it's so long, you don't notice it's just one line. Paul is good with that. He's good at, making a song sound pretty, but not too much going on there. Track number 3 is called Valentine Day, not Valentine's Day. Don't know why. And it's just in a simple guitar jam, bit of electric, bit of acoustic. It's the sound I describe as thick and clean. Track number 4 is called Every Night. And it may be that it's the first, normal pop song on the record. It's a song about the constant search for meaning. Track number 5 is Hot as Sun / Glasses. The title is perhaps a bit mysterious, but eventually you hear a calypso-like instrument, and it's just, Paul made this little jam that makes him think of the summer, think of the beach. And then after that, there's a part that I think he literally plays on wine glasses, thus glasses. Track number 6 is called Junk. This is a mournful tune with a quiet sound, and the first time I heard it, I was really frustrated because this is a Paul McCartney song I'd heard amped. I know it gets put on greatest hits collections, and I think this is just one where you have to listen to it a couple times because it's actually a cool, jazzy idea. It's Paul sort of imagining the junk in a garage or in bins on the street, sort of singing a sad choral song. I think the only reason it doesn't quite work for me is Paul's voice is just at a register where it sort of flows in like an instrument, and you don't hear the words right away. They don't have a lot of punch, but once you appreciate what he's going for with this one, it's a nice little tune. Track number 7 is called Man, We Was Lonely. You can hear Linda a bit on this one. It's a folky song, sounds like something that would be on Paul's next album, Ram. There's a little bit of weird synth stuff on here, but it's basically the McCartney version of simple, stripped-down folk. Track number 8 is called Ooh You. This is blues, but with Paul's sweet-sounding voice rather than his screamier one. It's like a bizarre, minimalist version of Bob Dylan's Just Like a Woman. Track number 9 is called Mama Miss America. Didn't have much of a reaction to this one. It's a pretty standard blues jam. Track number 10 is called Teddy Boy, so we're back to another sort of normal pop song on this album. Teddy Boys, I mean, I'm not great at talking about fashion, but I believe it was like a British thing in the 50s where you had hair like Elvis, but you dressed much nicer in Edwardian teddy suits, and this would have been the fashion the Beatles would have gone through before they settled on their final looks. And it's pretty easy to infer that Teddy, who Paul refers to as a character in this song, Teddy is John, because he sings about similar abandonment issues, father off in the army, mother who one day leaves Teddy. Teddy is very loyal to his mother, that, are vague, but, line up with John's story. Track number 11 is called Junk Sing-Along, so it's just a karaoke version of Junk. And track 12 is the real selling point for this record. It's Maybe I'm Amazed. Amazed is just a strong word, so I think that in itself hooks you in. And then it has interesting chord changes, a sort of simple but resonant solo, nice little ethereal organs, and Paul is just really into this one because it's just a very passionate love song, presumably about Linda. And I'm only frustrated that this one maybe didn't have one more verse or something, because I bought this record. This is the one I don't have from the library, because I knew Maybe I'm Amazed on it, and I was frustrated that none of the other songs really had that magic. So I just wanted Maybe I'm Amazed to be a little longer, I guess. And then finally, track number 13 is another instrumental. It is called Creen Acor, or Creen Acore. They're the name of a Brazilian indigenous group, though now that group is generally called the Panera. I don't know if the point is that original name was never right or what, but this was a group that Paul found out about in a documentary about them being an uncontacted people. Shortly after this, in 1973, there were some serious issues with contact and them getting a bunch of diseases. So now this group's, the Paneras, struggle with the Brazilian government, with highways, I understand to be a bit more serious. But yeah, that's a topic you can look into if you're following politics in that side of the world. The main thing here is just this is a sort of drum-based instrumental to end the record. Now, finally, on to George. All Things Must Pass is a double, kind of a triple album, sort of like Stevie Wonder's In the Key of Life. It's 2 full records of stuff and then a sort of bonus CD, though I like Stevie's bonus better than this one, but we'll get to that. This is also a 2001 reprint, so it has even more bonus tracks on that, but mostly they're just different drafts, like a weird version of My Sweet Lord, a karaoke version of What Is Life, so I won't talk about those. I'll just treat it like it's the original album. So track number 1, great opening to the album. It's called I'd Have You Anytime, a very mellow, smoky verse. It's accented by a positive chorus, and the chorus was written by Dylan. And though Harrison was known as the quiet Beatle, supposedly Dylan was the actual shy one amongst them. So the chorus is Dylan saying, thank you. Dylan wrote the chorus, he's saying, thank you to George Harrison for letting me be your friend. And the verse is George Harrison saying, hey man, you're really interesting, let's be friends. Track number 2, perhaps George Harrison's biggest hit, My Sweet Lord. So if you haven't heard this one, it just starts with nice, thick, simple chords, and then this slide guitar that takes you to a fluid, soulful state. And it goes a long way with surprisingly simple religious lyrics. My understanding of the meaning with this one is in Hinduism, or at least the school George Harrison was in, though it might look like a lot of other religions in other ways, one thing it doesn't have in common with the Abrahamic faiths is that obsession with faith. That in this religion, it is okay to want to see the Lord. You're not supposed to just have faith in him. So this song is George saying, look, I'm part of your religion, so I really want to see you, Lord. Come express yourself for me. Track number 3 is called Wah Wah. At first, this sounds like a very messy instrumental, and then George's voice rises in the mix occasionally. So it's kind of like he's breaking above a watery surface. So it's certainly a song that has a moment. Track number 4, Isn't It a Pity? So George really liked this one. It's sort of being It's sad about the selfishness and cruelty in the world. He liked it clearly because there are two slightly different versions of it on the double album, and my understanding is other people like this song. I guess the problem for me is in the context of this giant record. By track 4, I've already had a bit too much of the very thick production of this record. Phil Spector, known for the Wall of Sound, was involved in producing this one, and while I undoubtedly like the big sound on a lot of George's songs dating back to, Savoy Truffle, eventually it just starts to become too much on the ears, and that was my frustration with this one. That said, maybe I'm a bit of a hypocrite because the song that years ago made me realize George had a solo career and made me interested in him, track 5, What Is Life? I don't know, it's just those simple, punchy horns, the guitar hook, how George's voice just sounds like a classic Beatle in this one. The only thing that bothers me is for such a long song, the lyrics are so minimal, like he just repeats one of the verses rather than having a third. I also feel like this title of the song is kind of a trick. There's so much spiritualism on this record. The title is What Is Life, so you think it's going to be very philosophical, but what he actually sings is What Is My Life? And it's just, what is my life without your love? It's a love song. And not to say love and spirituality are disconnected. They can very much be part of the same experience. But I feel like it's a little bit of a trick to call the song What Is Life, but have the actual lyric be What Is My Life? Track number 6 is If Not For You. It sounds kind of similar to Bob Dylan's Love -0 No Limit. So when I sort of have heard it before, I'd always assumed it was George writing a song in the style of Bob Dylan, but it's actually originally a Bob Dylan song itself. It's from one of his lesser known records, New Morning, I think that album is called. So it's George singing Bob Dylan. It's a nice touch. It takes things a bit away from the big production. Track number 7 is called Behind That Locked Door. It's George singing country, but it has a bit of an echo to it, so it continues to maintain that big sound of the rest of the record. Track number 8 is Let It Down, another big sound, another epic sound collage, mixing mysterious smoky parts with big drums. And track 9, closing off the first record on the original LP, and kind of closing off the first disc on this CD before the bonus tracks, is called Run of the Mill. And again, it's roughly the average sound of this Phil Spector produced big sounding album. It does have some unique oomph to it because it carries a call to action. Everyone has choice when or not to raise their voice. So the second disc of track 1 there would be called Beware of Darkness. It has a mysterious sound that seems to focus not on literal fear on the dark, but internal darkness, letting your mind be corrupted. What's kind of cool is that the way the melody works when George sings Beware of Darkness, it's actually the happiest sounding part of the melody. Track number 2, I like it. It's a nice change of pace. It's called Apple Scruffs. It has a lot of harmonica in it. Again, so you're hearing Bob Dylan's influence on this record. I feel like the two big influences, well, I guess there's religion, there's Phil Spector, and there's Bob Dylan. And I like that Bob Dylan's folkiness is providing a bit of a counterbalance to the instinct to have a big sound. So yeah, very nice to hear our harmonica sound. And Apple Scruffs, by the way, refers to, the kind of people who would wait outside of Beatles concerts and scream at them. Track number 3 is the Ballad of Sir Frankie Crisp. So George bought this mansion called Friar Park. It used to belong to this guy called Frankie Crisp, and apparently George thought that, treated Frankie Crisp like he was someone who still lived there. The way I hear the song is he's kind of singing about Frankie Crisp as if he's a ghost. The bracketed subtitle of this song is Let It Roll, so I kind of picture that as nearly Sir Headless Nick, like Frankie Crisp's ghost's head is rolling around, though I don't know if that's what George meant by that. Track number 4 is Awaiting on You All. It's has a big sound, but I like this one. It's a spiritual protest song. It's kind of George's alternative to John singing Give Peace a Chance, because George is saying, you don't need your protests in bed, you need spirituality. But in some ways he, also commits to that left politics of John, because he's saying, look, institutional religion is corrupt. The Pope owns 51% of General Motors. You have to go back to the true religion if you really care about people. Track number 5 is All Things Must Pass. This one opens kind of slowly and mysteriously, like a sun rising or sun setting, whatever gives off the beautiful colors. And, of the spiritual religious songs, I like this one because I guess it's just very easy to identify the message. It's recognizing that everything is impermanent, which to someone with a very crude understanding of George's religious practices, okay, that's an important principle to articulate. Track number 6 is called I Dig Love. It's a soul track, simple lyrics, makes good use of piano riffs and organs. Track 7, Art of Dying. I guess philosophically, it goes with All Things Must Pass. It has scorching guitars and some very echoey singing. So perhaps George is just using the big production here because he's looking up to Phil Spector, but perhaps it's also because he thinks his own little voice isn't good enough to embody these big spiritual ideas. Like, he can't really talk confidently to embracing the art of dying, but if he raises himself to an ethereal level, he can. Track 8, you get another version of Isn't It a Pity. Track number 9, Hear Me Lord, and this would be the conclusion to record 2 of the double LP. So it's another big spiritual song. George's voice is straining here to rise above the big instrumental sound. There's a sort of surprise twist in the vocal sound in the bridge that sets the song apart for a few seconds. Otherwise, I don't know if it really feels like a closing because there's so many dramatic spiritual songs here, but perhaps this is the religion at the most somber, and perhaps the point where George is most clearly saying that he is religious, that it is not just a vague spirituality, vague values. He's stating, yeah, I made All Things Must Pass, and a lot of people are going to like it, but it is a true Hindu gospel record. So then you get into the tracks that would make up the bonus disc of the double, triple LP thing. They switch the order a bit on this one because it's a lot of instrumental at the end. So track 11 is Plug Me In. Track 12, I Remember Jeep. On track 13, Thanks for the Pepperoni. 11 and 12 are bluesy jams. Track 13, the pepperoni one, is a bit more of a Chuck Berry feel. But rather than having it be the second track of this bunch, they put at the front, It's Johnny's Birthday, so that's track 10 on disc 2, and so it's George singing Happy Birthday to John Lennon. It's big, sometimes off-key singing, makes good use of organ. It's a nice little alternative to Happy Birthday. So overall, there are certainly a lot of highs on these records. What I would say is that for sort of passively listening, Paul's is probably the pleasantest on the ear, but if you're listening closely, it gets frustrating given how many of these are half songs. It seemed to be almost a pathology of Paul that he only wrote songs as far as the idea came to him. And back in the Beatles' days, I guess he'd write half a song and put it in the Abbey Road medley or mix it up with one of John's songs, like he did with that song on Let It Be that I'm forgetting, or with A Day in the Life. John's song, given my politics and lack of religiosity, is most relatable in terms of its messaging, and it's also fairly easy on the ear. George Harrison is the one who most needed to break free, and there's a lot of great songs on here. Just the problem is too many of them are too similar, and they all have such a big sound. Listened to all together, it can be a bit overwhelming. So a few weeks ago, I came up with this formulation that we shouldn't be sad that the Beatles broke up because, in a way, the Beatles had already broken up even when they were still making records together. After those early years when they were genuinely writing Lennon, McCartney compositions, you started to get songs like Yesterday or Eleanor Rigby that were clearly Paul's, or I Am the Walrus or Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds that were clearly John's, that, they were Lennon-McCartney compositions by convention only, and really, Beatles records were just compilations of John songs, Paul songs, and then increasingly George songs, and then occasionally if Ringo had a song. So on the one hand, I think, of course the Beatles broke up because they were blossoming into these solo artists with unique visions, and all the Beatles essentially were compilations of works by these different solo artists. And for George's sake, it made sense that the Beatles broke up because, he was hired as their lead guitarist, and even if there was no sort of formal putting down of him, the culture was not there for, him with his songs, often with a very unique spiritual agenda, to start playing an equal role on the records as John and Paul's songs. At the same time, listening to all these records makes me think these guys had very strong senses of themselves, and occasionally that leads to a really good song, but it was also clearly important for them all to work together and work on each other's concepts to make sure the best of each other's songs rose to the top. What fascinates me is that the songs that were distinctly John when he was with the Beatles, so again, I'm the Walrus, Strawberry Fields, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, sound nothing like the stuff on John's solo album, and if anything, he says, that wasn't really me, even though obviously it was a huge part of him. So it was almost as if John, while working with these others, had this incentive to layer his politics and absurdism within a realm of beauty and artistry that he seemed unwilling to do when he went solo. There are two lyrics that resonated with me as I made this video. One was from the song God, where John sings, I was the Dream Reaver, but now I'm reborn. I was the Walrus, but now I'm John. The other lyric I think about is from the Beatles album, the White Album, and specifically the song Glass Onion, where John sings, the Walrus is Paul. Now, Glass Onion may have been intended as largely a nonsensical song meant to mess with the minds of fans, but I'm tempted to read meaning into that line. It's hard to think of a Beatles song more associated with John Lennon than I Am the Walrus. So in saying that the Walrus is Paul, John is acknowledging the fundamentally collaborative nature of the Beatles, and the fact that without Paul's inspiration there, the version of John Lennon that existed in the Beatles might not have existed at all. And similarly, when George's songs were mixed up with the other Beatles, songs like Something or Here Comes the Sun or While My Guitar Gently Weeps, they sound uniquely resonant. Whereas, when he records all those songs at once under similar conditions, they start to blend into each other. And finally, Paul might have the strongest sense of beauty of all of them, but he's the least committed to either a spiritual or a political worldview, which, makes it harder for him to finish some of his songs because he doesn't necessarily have a particular message he wants to convey with them other than that he loves Linda. So on the one hand, great talents, all of them, yet they knew a bit too much what they wanted to do, and sometimes what they wanted to do came at the expense of making a good record. So you could certainly make a case that these were three solo artists and made sense for them to make solo albums. But then again, if they worked together on these songs and they played the best of them, it could only have been better. Hope you enjoyed these reviews and look forward to talking about more classic albums going forward. I'm Zach Morgenstern. This is Ludwig von B. See you next time.